All right, this is the answer key video for the lesson 3 and 4 study guide. All right, so again, these problems are going to be similar, not identical to the ones that you'll see on your quiz tomorrow, okay? So again, make sure that you understand the skills and you're not just trying to memorize these answers, because I promise you, if you memorize these answers, you will not get them correct, all right? So again, the first skill that we talked about here was rearranging equations for specific variables. Or again, we said solving for each equation. So again, number 1 here, solve for A. So what does that mean? That means take that equation and rearrange it so that A is equal to something. All right? So again, here we got to subtract by B to get AX by itself. And since C and B are different, we have to have it as C minus B. Then we need to isolate A by dividing both sides by X. Okay, and again, you divide by X, divide the entire thing by X. And there we go. We got our final expression of A is equal to C minus B over X. Okay. Now, number 2 here is giving us a real world scenario. To find the amount of income you would make, right, you use this formula, P equals I minus E, where P represents the amount of profit, I represents the income, and E represents the expenses paid of the company. Okay, so remember, whenever we deal with real world situations here, you need to take an inventory, okay? So take that inventory. What does P stand for? Oh, profit. What does I stand for? Income. What does E? Expenses. All right, and then as we progress through the problem, you would update that inventory. Okay, so the first one says solve the equation for I, which again means rearrange so that I is equal to something. All right, so again, I got to get I by itself, so I have to add E to undo that. P plus E equals I, or another way of saying that is I is equal to P plus E. All right, so my profit plus my expenses gives me my income. All right, now, if the company's expenses are $35,000, right? So we add that into our inventory, and the profit is $101,550. Okay, what's the company's total amount of income? Well, we update our inventory, we rewrite our general equation, we replace, and then we solve. So again, it should be the exact same steps every time, right? Rewrite the equation, replace, solve. Okay. Now with these here, we're solving each absolute value equation, all right? And basically, what we have to remember with these absolute value equations is that we can have the absolute value of a positive 10, and that would give us 10, and we have the absolute value of a negative 10, which would also give us positive 10. So what that means here is we have to write 2 expressions, okay? We write 2 expressions. We write the expression equal to a positive 10 and it equal to a negative 10. All right, then what you'll notice here is we do the exact same steps, but again, the only thing that's different is the right-hand side of that equation. So we're going to subtract by 16 to get 2x by itself. We're going to divide by 2 to get x by itself again, and you end up with x is equal to negative 3 and negative 13. If we wanted to, we could plug these back in, check our answer to make sure that we either get a positive or a negative 10. All right, number 4 here, the absolute value of x is equal to 12. Well, that means that x is either a positive or a negative 12. All right, with number 5 here, we have the absolute value by itself is equal to a negative value. Okay, and that one's going to be no solution because, again, we can't ever have an absolute value that is positive. Or sorry, that is negative. They always have to be positive. All right, so again, that's those 3 main types of problems there. All right, next one, graph the solution and inequality on the provided number line, okay? Write that x is greater than or equal to a negative 5. So again, we have to know what the symbols stand for. X is greater than, that line underneath means, or equal to negative 5. Okay, so that's our inequality. Then we go and we make our number line. Okay, again, doesn't really matter. All I need is that you have the point, a closed point at negative 5, since it is also equal to. All right, you have a ray pointing to the right since it is greater than. Okay, and that the numbers on the number line get larger going to the right and smaller going to the left. Okay, With number 7 here, before we can plot this, we have to get it that x is some inequality and then a number or value on the other side. So we got to isolate our x. So add 6, then divide by 2. We have x is less than a positive 4. So again, we go to our number line. Doesn't really matter what it is, but this one here is less than, right? So it's an open circle with the ray pointing to the left. Okay. Number 8 and 9 here, write the compound inequalities, right, based off of this table here. So again, if we're in Austin, Texas, in January, we're looking at this range here, 41 to 62, which means that x is got to be greater than or equal to 41 because 41 is also a value, and it's got to be less than or equal to 62. So what we do is we combine both of those, right, by just combining your x's. Okay. Same thing, Columbus, Ohio in August. We're looking 63 to 83. All right, so again, x is greater than or equal to 63 and less than or equal to 83. Okay, so that's my compound inequality there. All right. Next, solve and graph each compound inequality. Well, for or statements here, we will have two separate inequalities. Okay, they can be the same or they can be different. All right, so in this one, they're two different. So we're going to solve each of them individually. And what we notice here is we get x is less than a negative 2, and it is greater than, or it is greater than a negative 0.5. Okay, so again, I went to my number line and I went up every 2 by a value of 1. Again, I don't necessarily care. Your number line just has to make some sense here, right? It has to go up by the same increments every time. All right, so negative 2 less than 0.5, negative 0.5 greater than. Okay. All right. On the next one here, this one is one of your and statements. It's put together. So again, what we do is we write two inequalities by pretending that that guy's not there to get this first one right there. And then we pretend that that one's not there to get our second one over here. Okay, but we still solve using the exact same steps since it's the same middle part here. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. Okay, then we're going to divide by a negative 2. And remember, when we divide by a negative, we have to flip our inequalities. Okay, so again, I end up with a negative 6 is greater than x, and x is greater than negative 10. All right, so again, I went to my number line. It was less than negative 6, greater than negative 10, and since they are meeting, right, you draw it like this with your two rays meeting. It's got those two conditions it's got to follow. So this is our and statement. Okay. This one here says the solution of the disjunction is graphed below. What's the inequality? Okay. Well, you have two inequalities here. The first one, we have an open circle, okay, which means it is just going to be a less than or greater than. It's not also equal to. Contrast, this one has a closed circle, which means it's also going to be equal to. All right, this ray is pointing to the left. All right, so it's going to be x is less than the point where it's at, which is 7. This one here, x is greater than or equal to, because it's a closed circle, at the point 11. All right. This one here, solve the absolute value inequality and graph the solutions. Okay. Well, remember, we have to check, is the absolute value by itself? Absolutely. Okay, so we've got to set up a positive version of this, and we've got to flip it and do the negative version. Again, by flipping, we're flipping the inequality sign. All right, but we still solve using the exact same steps, and we end up with x is less than a 0.5 or greater than a negative 0.9. Okay, so again, number lines don't have to be perfect, but they have to have a pattern that is reasonable. Okay, so again, I went up every 2 by about 0.5, right? And that means that this right there is about my 0.9. Okay, last two here. These would be considered like bonus type questions. All right, so the absolute value here in number 1 is not by itself, so we have to divide by -5, and when we divide by a negative, we flip the inequality, okay? So I end up with absolute value of x plus 12 is greater than a positive 7. Then again, remember, when we have an absolute value and an inequality, we have to set up 2 expressions. We set up the positive version where the inequality stays the same, and we have the negative, and we flip the inequality again, all right? Both, though, we're going to subtract by 12, and we end up with x is less than a -5, and it's greater than a -19. So again, plot that on your number line. It should look like that. 2 open circles that are meeting in that designated range. Okay? And finally, number 2 here. Okay, the first one, the absolute value is by itself. Great. So we're going to set up 2 expressions, the positive version, and we're going to flip the inequality and write the negative version. Okay? Then from there, we can solve this multiple ways, but in this one here, I decided to distribute first. Okay, so distribute, right? Then we're going to move the 4 to the other side to isolate our x, divide by 4 to get that coefficient out in front to be a 1, and we have x is greater than 5, or it is less than a -3. So again, on my number line, those are going to be 2 open circles pointing in opposite directions. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. But this covers some of the main skills that we need to know for our test, okay? Again, remember, it is not this exact thing. The numbers will change, the skills will change, okay? But you get a general idea of what you're going to be asked. All right, thanks, guys.